In the recent months of January and February, I've been shooting with the Fujifilm's XF 18mm f2 lens. And now this is a very interesting lens because it has quite a reputation in the field. If you guys haven't noticed, I like to pick up and see for myself a lot of cameras and lenses and things that have a certain reputation about them. I have interest in that stuff. So the recent one I've been testing, using, reviewing is the XF 18mm f2. And there's a lot of mixed reviews about this lens. Many people will say it's a bad lens, and some people will say it doesn't matter what lens, how bad it is, as long as you have a lens and shoot with it. So I wanted to see for myself if this lens was really that quote unquote bad, or if people were just overreacting. I wanted to see if it was an underrated lens or not. So I've been using it with the Fujifilm X Pro 1, which is appropriate because the lens and the camera were basically released together. So it gives me a good sense of how the optics were back then. So this review is going to be mainly about my experiences. It's not going to be too technical or anything like that. I just want to see how good or how bad this lens is. So let's get into it. Let's go ahead and start with a few of the negative things people are saying about this lens, because at 18mm f2, this lens actually gets a lot of comparisons to the other Fujifilm primes, the f2 primes specifically. Many people say it's not up to par with the fantastic prime quality Fujifilm offers. So let's go ahead and start with build quality. First off, first impressions, this lens is actually really light. It only weighs about 116 grams. And so this could be a good or a bad thing. A lot of people think it's a bad thing because people like the all metal construction of the other prime lenses. Now this lens is not metal, I believe. It feels like plastic. It's very light, and it doesn't seem to be the most premium lens out of Fujifilm's lineup. Some people, I think, don't like this because it doesn't feel as tactile or as nice to use, because it feels a little plasticky and cheap. So overall, the build quality isn't anything crazy. What's nice about this lens, however, is it does come with one of Fujifilm's unique and interesting crushed can lens hood. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in this, because I do very much so enjoy square hoods. And so the 18mm f2 I was attracted to because of just its general design and aesthetic. Which leads me to obviously the 35mm f1.4, but that's for another time if I ever get my hands on that lens. But overall, the square hood is kind of cheap as well. It's plasticky, but it's just a nice design overall. Now, another thing people are saying about this lens is that it has a awkward kind of focal length. It's an 18mm focal length, which means about 27 or 28 full frame. And to be honest, it is a little weird because it is slightly wider than the lens I'm used to, which is the 23mm or 35 equivalent. Now, shooting with this did take some time to get used to, but after shooting pictures, after taking time to learn this focal length, I actually became a little more comfortable with it. I can't say it's my favorite type of focal length, obviously, but you can get some really awesome shots because most of the things you are framing, you can actually work with in terms of 18mm. It's not wide to the point where it's like fisheye or distorted or anything like that. It sits at a very nice focal length actually. And so I don't understand why certain people don't like this focal length. I guess it can be awkward at first, but if you think about it, it shares the same focal length as your phone. Many smartphones have an 18mm focal length, and it also shares the same focal length as the Leica full frame Q or Q2, because those have a 28mm equivalent, so it's about the same as this lens. I personally can't say anything bad about this focal length. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. It's a very interesting thing to shoot with, and I'm trying to get more comfortable as the months go on. Next up, let's talk about this lens's autofocus, because this is one of Fujifilm's oldest X-mount lenses. So naturally, the autofocus isn't going to be up to par or up to speed as any of the newer ones that we are using currently. But I honestly can't say it's too bad. I think when I'm using single autofocus mode, I can acquire focus very easily and just take the picture. It doesn't cause me any problems or anything of the sort. Now, I can see why it would cause you problems if you're using continuous focus mode, because something this lens has is actually a quite significant amount of focus breathing. It's going to pulse in and out. It's going to give you more problems if you're trying to focus for a continuous period of time. So obviously, I don't think anyone would use this lens for video. It's primarily a photographer's lens, and I don't think it would do very well in video at all because of its poor autofocus capabilities. Now, that being said, just for taking pictures, I don't find it to be a problem. I don't think it's that slow to the point where it's going to hinder my progress. I feel like I've lost more shots due to negligence out in the field rather than a lens being too slow for me. And if you're coming from anything like a manual focus lens or a vintage lens, then this lens honestly is not bad because it acquires focus relatively accurately. It'd be a different thing if it was missing focus all over the place, but with single focus mode and even manual mode, you can get focus relatively accurately. Now, manual focus mode isn't really a joy to shoot with. I don't particularly like the way this lens feels. Just turning that, I would rather shoot in autofocus mode actually, but it is possible. It is a thing with this lens. Next up, let's talk about image quality because this is another aspect of this lens that gets a lot of mixed reviews. Some people think the image quality out of this lens isn't up to par with a lot of the other Fujifilm primes and zooms, etc. And many people would argue that this actually doesn't matter. What matters is that you're actually taking the picture out in the field. In my experience, I could say this lens is definitely not as sharp as some of the other Fujifilm primes or nearly as clear. There's definitely a little lower image quality when compared to the other Fujifilm lenses. Now, is this enough to make me stray away from this lens? Obviously not. I personally don't care that heavily about image quality. That's why I use UV filters on a lot of my lenses, is because it's a little more negligible for me. I feel like instead of trying to maximize pixel count and image quality, sharpness, and all those things, it's more important that I'm actually out there taking pictures. So for me, it's like the best lens is the one you have with you, or the best camera is the one you have with you. So I personally can't say too much about image quality. I think it is good enough to get stuff done for me. So I enjoy it enough to the point where I don't need something more. Now, obviously, if this lens was better, more superior, had more sharpness and all that stuff, then it'd be a lot more easier to recommend. But as someone who cares more about the shooting experience and the framing lines and composition, I can say this lens gets the job done. So after all of that, overall, what is my conclusion on this lens? Is it really as underrated as some people are saying, or is it really just accurately rated? Is this lens actually that quote unquote bad? In my personal experience, I don't believe it's actually that bad. However, in terms of, I would say, comparing it to other lenses in the Fujifilm lineup, I believe this lens is pretty accurately rated, if not slightly underrated. I believe you can do a lot of things with this lens and people don't give it enough credit, but at the price point you can find it for, I got mine at about $224. That's a relatively affordable lens in my opinion, and it's at quite a solid price. Now, in terms of competition, obviously you can pick up Viltrox lenses for about a little bit more than this lens, so it might not be worth your interest to get this sort of lens. But if you're interested in one of Fujifilm's oldest lenses that has quite a reputation about it, you're interested in the focal length, you want to try something new, or you want to challenge yourself to produce something more with something people rate so lowly, then I could recommend this lens. In my opinion, I will hold onto it longer. It is a poor man's Leica Q or Leica Q2, and I honestly have not felt hindered in the sense that I feel like this lens would be holding me back that much to the point where I'm just disgusted, you know? It's a very solid lens overall, and yeah. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the Fujifilm XF 18mm f2. If you guys like this video, please do like and subscribe to this channel, and please do share your comments and experiences when using this XF 18mm f2 lens. I know obviously that this review is generally very biased and very true to my personal opinion, so I'm curious to what you guys think about this lens. Has it held up to what people are saying about it? Has it done better? Has it done worse? I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts and opinions. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys in another video. Peace.